Okay, so I think we should get started. And hello and welcome everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on building content review and QA processes. Uh, this is a part of a webinar series that we will be continuing to do in the upcoming months. And my name is Tara, and I will be the panelist for today's session. And this webinar will be recorded, and this will end up with a Q&A session, and the recording will be sent to everybody's inboxes. Then thank you for being here, and I request everybody to just introduce yourself in the chat. And during the webinar, if you have any kind of questions, feel free to use the Q&A option to ask, and we are definitely going to discuss all of those questions towards the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, let me introduce today's speaker, which is none other than our CEO, Bhavya Agrawal, and the founder and CEO of zipBoard. So Bhavya, take it away.
Am I visible? Yes. All right.
Yes, you're absolutely visible.
Tara, you'll have to let me share screen as well. Okay. Hi, guys. Let me quickly get my screen ready. Are you guys able to see my screen? Good. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so glad to see some of the familiar names already. And to see activity in the chat. Thank you, people, for showing all the support. This is our first webinar in the series, and we really hope to get more people talk about the content review processes and also really take the bottlenecks of how to build a better content review process. So I would really love to keep this as interactive as possible. You can, I'll keep on going through the questions and seeing if there's anything that I can give in context while I'm speaking. So feel free to ask questions. I already see some familiar names. Hi, Lubika. It's really great to see you. Deborah, I know that you guys are, it's your evening. So thank you again. So just to set perspective, we are going to talk about setting up a content review and QA process. That's what we are here for today. I would love to know, and some of you have already shared what you're interested in and what kind of content you're producing. A lot of you guys are producing e-learning content, which tends to be very complex, tends to have a lot of elements and a lot of stakeholders. But is there anything specific that you're looking to get away from the session? Please feel free to jump in and ask as well. Before I talk more about me or the session, let me tell you, this is all brought to you by zipBoard. zipBoard loves creators like you. We are a product for agencies to build better systems for content review, for enterprises, for small teams, no matter what the size of the team, what your work is. We do know that getting content reviews is a painful process, and we want to streamline it and make it secure and make it scalable. A little intro about me, and in fact, even before I tell more about me, there's a fun fact about me. I've lived in about 8 cities. I counted it last night. I was thinking, what can I talk about? I've lived in about 8 cities and 3 countries, and I'm now in one of my favorite cities, Vancouver. And in fact, if you guys can share in the chat where are you dialed in from, some of you guys I already know, but it'll be really exciting to see how and where we are all located and how interesting the world is today, that we can all be dialed in and speaking from different parts of the world. I always find it very fascinating. All right, before I keep talking about that, okay, I still don't see anybody. All right, yeah, from Zurich, Switzerland. Thank you. It must be late there. So I will speak about me as to where this came from. Thank you, from New Delhi too. It must be late, like 9:30 p.m. My team is in Delhi actually, but in India, so I understand it's late for a lot of people here. Um, so I'll talk about myself real quick. I really started as an aerospace engineer, and then I started working in software development at one of the largest companies for CAD development in the US, and it's loved by almost about 6 million users worldwide. And creating a product that is loved by so many people is not easy, and I've learned a lot from there. I then went on to start my own venture in my home country. I started supporting product and content teams uh, uh, in sort of consulting and providing them QA services. And that's where really my frustration of dealing with so many people in different time zones really started coming up. I realized that I was working on some e-learning content, I was working some product development, and every time I had to share feedback, I was literally taking a screenshot on Snagit, putting it in Jira, putting it in a spreadsheet. uh, it was just not effective. It was just painful, and I could not get on a Skype call for every damn thing. So it did not work for me. And that is really what led me to start zipBoard. And that is what really we are here to talk about as well, right? To take away the chaos of collaboration and reviewing, when so many elements in today's world, what we are reviewing, are visual, right? So, okay, enough about me. Yes, Snagit was painful, Lubika. It was painful in the sense that you're putting things in Snagit, you're adding the comment there, but then when somebody replies, you still don't have the reference to the first comment and so on. So yeah, hopefully zipBoard solves some of those problems. I know it does, but yeah. So, about me and zipBoard, let's talk about what are we talking about today. And I know a lot of you have shown interest in you know in understanding how to set up a content review process, especially for getting feedback from clients and customers. And that's what we are talking about. We'll first talk about what is the prerequisite for a good content review process, because not necessarily everything that we not necessarily having a content review tool or a content review process would set you up for success, right? And then we'll talk about how do you really establish a content review process, like what are the elements to look for, what are the things that you should, setting up your review cycles, enabling your reviewers, organizing all that feedback that you get, and what are the internal QA elements and setup that you need to think about. And like anything else, it has to be iterative. We have to improve on it. So we'll talk about that too. And then followed by any question and answers that I might have missed during the call. All right. So why do I say that, you need to get prepared? You need to have a prepared and I think a good content review process goes in parallel with a good content production process, because if there is no well-established content production process, a review process only is an aid to build, or to optimize a production process, right? So I think that's why I'm really talking about, focusing on the right things and focusing on thinking about the process at large. But before even we get there, let me understand from all of you, why do you think you need a review and QA process? What led you to actually come on this call and, think about that, okay, you know what, I really need to think about our QA and review process. How would it make your life better? Can you guys tell on the chat before I push and tell you that, okay, yes, this is why you should do it? Anyone? Okay. All right. So I'll start, and I'll see if there's more interest. But I think one of the things is that everybody aims to build quality content, and as more and more teams are building more and more content, it's very, very difficult I see some, yes, unless there's a process, you cannot take the maximum out of collaborative work. So yes, I agree, Lubika. Smoother process for customer review, absolutely, Marcus. So that's really exactly. So I mean, I think the whole point is cohesion. The whole point is creating collaboration, creating trust, building quality content, because it doesn't come easy and it doesn't come without a good review and feedback process, without people giving inputs and sharing their insights, right? If you do have a good content review process, you end up building a quality content. You end up creating trust, because people can trust what you're sharing is actually useful, is can be trusted, can be is verified, and is also good quality. Like, it doesn't have spelling mistakes, it doesn't have even silly things, right? Like, but it just works. And then, of course, creating resonance. The more trust you create, the more you build trust with people, and they resonate with you. They want to consume more of your content. So it's all about that as well, right? Like, as a creator, that's in fact some of the things that you, to be able to scale, to be able to build resonance, you need to get to a point where uh, you can talk about different topics. And that's another challenging thing that I've come across with creators today, that even though you don't have knowledge about that subject, you have to build content for that subject. And that is where the power of collaboration comes in. That's where your subject matter experts, they give you a lot of insight and tell you what you can do better, right? And then, of course, in the end, you'll end up saving time because you have a process in place. You'll end up creating more, you'll grow more, you'll have a larger team. So that's really that's really the point here, right? So, Samira, I'll get to your question when I talk about reviewers, but that's a good question for sure. Okay, so let's talk about what do you really need to get set up to for a good review process. It's we can talk about having a review process, but really, if everybody doesn't have common content goals and you don't know what you're really getting out of that content, it can be a pointless effort, right? People could be giving review and feedback in all sorts of direction, not having a goal in place. So I think the first and foremost, and again, this runs across the production process as well, right? Everybody, whether they're collaborators, whether they're reviewers, whether they are beta testers, whoever is involved, they have to be very well aware of the goals that what is it that are you going to teach. Let's say I'm creating a content to travel to Italy. That's a complex topic. We have to think about where, who is it for, how, what are the kind of budgets, what are the goals in the end, what are we asked, why are we doing it? Do we need more conversions? Do we need more people to come and learn about Italy? Is it sponsored by somebody? Is there a business goal behind it? So knowing that goal is really important. It keeps everybody on the same page. Then, of course, identifying the roles. And again, this is again being content production teams. You guys would know this more than me for sure. But again, depending on the complexity of the projects, you can have, I would say there are three broad categories I would divide the team in. One is a content production team, and this is where you will have your designers, your copywriters, your developers. If you're using any special tools, so specialized tools, if you're doing videos, then of course audio related to it, the script writing and whatnot. So this can really scale depending on how, what kind of content you're building. And then there is a subject matter experts. So if I take the example back to Italy, you would need somebody who knows very well about Italy, and they're able to tell you what to expect, what not to expect, and so on. And they would be giving you all the knowledge base that is required, right? And then the business stakeholders are clients, and that really, again, if it's a large team building for internal business stakeholders, or if it's an agency, the clients become your business stakeholders. They are the one who will tell you that this is my goal, why we are building this content. Because we could be building everything, like, a lot of things, but we have to stay focused on that goal. And that is what the business stakeholders really try and get us also. So here is a very quick overview of, oops, did I skip one slide? Yeah. So I think one more thing is to, of course, have a full-blown content production workflow. Now, for, again, every content, this is not a standard template. It's not something that I'm suggesting. This is, in fact, a template that has come from one of our clients, Ellen Learning, but this could be, it could very well vary for different teams, for different type of content as well. But typically you would have some kind of a kickoff, some kind of analysis phase, some kind of design phase, or development phase, and then your alpha, beta, and final, right? So having a workflow in place right in the beginning, again, helps everybody sort of stay focused, know, okay, what to expect. Have, even for the internal team and for external team, to sort of know that, okay, you know what, this is my workflow, this is how we are going to proceed through building this content. And that helps everybody being on the same page. But once you do set up a workflow, you should be setting up timelines, right? Which is again giving and delivering, letting people know that these are the expected timelines. And I know that none of this can be so fixed, but just to give a rough sense of, okay, this is what we are planning. This is how much time it will take to get there. And that's really that's really what we, that's really what needs to be communicated to everyone. Once you do have all that set up, build a creative brief, some kind of brief which gives people, again, a good sense of who we are building this for, whether this is for, K-12, is this for, audience which do not have mobile access. Understanding your audience is one, then the sharing the technology, where it will be published, how it will be published, who's going to consume it, how are they going to consume it, right? Setting up the objectives and the priorities and timelines, like I said, the timelines we've already talked about, but what are the objectives, what are the priorities? Because we could be building anything on this under the earth, but you want to really prioritize and build what you're aiming to build and get your goals close to, right? And then, of course, telling everybody about the stakeholders who all are involved. And Deborah, to your question, yes, the subject matter experts can sometimes be stakeholders or clients as can be clients. I'm not. In fact, there are a few models that I have had recent discussions with some of the teams there. I've even heard that the subject matter experts now also tend to be content creators, where the content teams are educating the subject matter experts how to build the content, and they provide the tech know-how and the educational know-how as to what builds a good content. Basically, they guide the subject matter experts to build the content. So that's also another model, again, that really depends on how your team is set up, what are the business goals, what are the overall expectations. If you do have a smaller team, content production team, it does end up being too much work. And then you also want to make sure that there is cohesiveness. So the content teams takes up the quality and the making sure everything is on point, whereas the subject matter experts take the role of really building the content as well, because they have the knowledge. Another thing that is very important is to share brand guidelines. And I think that again helps the cohesion that we're talking about, right? Because let's say you're building multiple content pieces which are to the same tune, which may be consumed by the same set of people. If they are not, if you're not sharing a brand guideline, it's very difficult. Oops, somehow my computer keeps dancing. It's very difficult to sort of, like somebody might say, can you change this to green? Can you change this to brown? No, like, if there is a brand guideline, and not just to colors, but the tone, the voice, who we are speaking to, in what language we want to speak in. So setting up that brand guideline sets up the entire team for success again, right? You're not like scrambling for these things. And this really, some of this whole work that we have talked about so far, this really again is a content production workflow, but this can go help build, if you have a structure for all of these things, this can help in multiple content pieces and you're not repeating that work quite a bit, right? There is no hustling at the stage of the review, because you've already established some ground rules. So okay, so now we've talked about the basic sanity. Do you guys have any comments, any questions, any feedback so far, or we should move to talking about building a review workflow? Gaurav, to your point, I think again, strict deadlines, having some kind of deadlines, of course, helps, because this team really does stick to it, and they will ensure that they will ensure that that everybody, because it's a cascading effect. If you do not, in fact, stick to the deadlines, you do end up sort of being all over the place, missing deadlines for your next content and so on. So it really does help to talk about deadlines, but also at the same time, I think it's a two-way process. It's a collaborative process of setting deadlines as well. So I think what is important is to make sure that all your collaborators, especially the subject matter experts or the business stakeholders, you have a buy-in from them and understand that, okay, look, these are the deadlines and we have this kind of timeline for the reviews. So we are dependent on you for that, right? So I think setting up that expectation up front does help people to sort of stick to deadlines as well. All right, so we did talk about having a full-blown production structure, right? What I do say is that expecting to do content reviews all the way at the end, like in the alpha or your beta or your final, is like saying, okay, here I've baked everything and now test it, and it's too late. It's like, I got a haircut a few days ago. They cut it so short, there's nothing I can do with it, right? if if I had gotten involved early on, okay, this is what I'm looking for, this is how much I can. So really setting that expectation early on is very important. And that's why I mean, we typically have seen the teams, and this is again coming from the same ELM learning team. They have shared that every stage they go through when they're going through, let's say, a content analysis, the content planning, they go through an internal QA, then they go through a review, and then they again go through another QA process. So this really helps to move from one stage to another without taking the friction from one to another, right? You really move with all the good things. You take all that feedback and then you integrate into your next step, rather than coming all the way here and then feeling like this is not
when the project gets
sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so it's feeling like this is not going to work. And in fact, in my next slide, I'm going to this is a quick snippet of video from one of our clients, ELM Learning. They're a San Diego based learning agency, and they did a conference talk on how they are using zipBoard, especially for, or in fact, how they have their content production set up. And I'll be happy to share that video with you guys. But I've taken a snippet from how Beth here, who is the QA manager and the accessibility manager at ELM Learning, how they set up these phases inside of zipBoard so that there is a better way for everyone to see how to set up a review structure. So I'm not going to speak next. It's going to be Beth speaking.
When the project gets started, what the PM does is they will set up what the phases are that are going to be used for that particular project. So not every project follows the same kind of path. Some clients will have just alpha to final. Others will go alpha, beta, final. Sometimes we'll have the storyboard in here as well. So it's a varied set of processes that we follow here. But getting it set up correctly, this allows us to better manage all of the issues that come in, and we can show progress and burn down and all of those things that the executive team would want to know as well.
All right, yeah. So this is, I mean, that's the beauty of setting up everything in one place, that you can, if you set up your review cycles in one place, then everybody sort of knows what to expect. And again, if you are building multiple content pieces, even if they're connected, you can really, you can really break it down. Chinmay and Tarasekar, yes, I think I agree with both of you. Having too many stringent deadlines can be a painful process, but at the same time, having some kind of structure helps everybody be on the same page as well. So you have to find a balance between what works and what doesn't, right? So another challenge with the content teams is versions, because you will end up having a lot of same stuff that you've built first time, then you're getting feedback on it, you'll revise it, then you'll again get another set of feedback on it. So in that sense, you need to make sure that you're setting up yourself again in a way that it's a cohesive structure across all projects, right? Every time when you're, you know that, okay, this is my story, this is my storyboard. So I'm going to call it, my very first version is going to be called Story Maps V1. And then when I create the next version, or maybe I do not have the next version of it at all, then it will not go here. So having a naming structure and having a place where you can upload all of that content and all the versions is again a great way for everybody to sort of know what we started from, what we ended up getting to. And that's again one of the things that you can do with support, that you can really put different kind of content and different versions of that content as well in the same project. So you're not like, every time sharing a new link, finding where the files were, or so on, right? And you can really name them the way you like them. So it makes it easy for the team to, and that's one thing that again, I've seen with a lot of clients, that they end up naming them quite comprehensively, in fact, like with the client name, with the content, what they're building, the version, and so on. So have a naming convention, it really helps. Okay, how many review cycles are enough? And I think, was that a question before? No. Okay, so there have been studies where they're saying with 83% of creative projects are approved within 5 rounds of review. I feel like 5 rounds of review are good. Sounds like a doable thing, but imagine having 12, 13 rounds of reviews. It'll just not help, right? Because you're every time you take a review, you're taking back and making those revisions, making those changes, and so on. But why do you end up having too many reviews? And again, to my point again, if you're not getting feedback early enough, you are going to end up being in this burn of multiple review rounds, trying to justify too much, and really getting to a point where you have to start from scratch again. Right. So I think that's why it's very important to focus on getting that feedback as early as possible, so that, some of the things that are the basics are covered. You're staying true to the goal every time, in every iteration. It's a more agile process, and you're really able to make changes faster without them being very costly. Okay, let's talk about reviewers. And I think that's in fact a very important aspect of getting the feedback right as well, right? Who can be, how do you choose your reviewers? I mean, I know that sometimes you don't have the choice, but at least it's very important to understand that, you cannot have too many reviewers. too many reviewers does not mean good quality content. Too many reviewers sometimes can in fact be detrimental to to e-learning, to any kind of content, not just e-learning, right? Because you could have conflicting views, you could have not vested reviewers who do not have the time, or who are not equally invested in that content that you're producing as well. So you need to make sure that you get the most invested reviewers who have the right expertise as well, for the right kind of expertise as well, right? And also set the order for their review. So, for example, somebody is going to review your copy. Maybe they need to come in early because you want to make sure you want them to come in early, and then you want to have them come in at the end as well. But at least they will, in the early stage, be able to determine, okay, this is the tone, this sounds right, this is how much content we should share, and so on, right? So setting that order of the review and not having them review every time also helps, because then you're really focusing on, in every review cycle, you're focusing on the right things, right? Check their availability up front, because again, more than likely your reviewer is going to be very busy and they become a bottleneck for you, right? So you really need to understand and check with them again. When you share your timelines, you need to communicate those timelines. You need to understand, is that a viable thing or not? And in fact, maybe even set up a cadence that if in case they're not available, what is the alternative? But setting those expectations right from with the reviewers is so important. And then if you have multiple reviewers, and this is often the case from the same client, let's say, or from the same set of, from the same business team, you definitely want to understand from them who is going to be the ultimate approver of all these, because you would get conflicting reviews. You would find people sharing conflicting reviews, and not having that clarity would really set your team for confusion. You would not know where to proceed. You would not know, who to listen to, and so on. So you definitely want to make sure that you understand who will approve those comments, right? Chinmaya, for the how many ideal rounds of review for a small to medium scale e-learning project? I really cannot honestly comment on that. I depends on, again, if there's one creator, there can be probably two reviewers and maybe 3 review cycles. But again, really depends on the setup. Really depends on how you're starting. Are you starting from a storyboard to directly loading it into your the articulate storyline or any kind of authoring tool? So depends on how you set up your project. But ideally, you do want people who have the business perspective and also the content perspective, like the content perspective and also the design perspective, like the copy, the design, the look and feel, and so on. So you definitely want both of those perspectives in your reviews. Another thing very important is to guide your reviews. Again, like I said, like setting timelines is important, but also, like, if you're using something like zipBoard, let's say, or any other tools, that if you're going to use any tools, any methods, any specific way in which you work, guiding the reviewers is a good way to sort of make sure, again, they are aware why you're soliciting feedback in this way, or what this is what will help. So keeping them sort of aligned on this will help you, again, get an easy way to get feedback as well, right? You're not struggling later on because you've sort of set them up for success early on. Now, this is very interesting that a study found, and I should have quoted the source, a study found that 94% of negative website feedback, it was design related. So most of the time people crib or complain about design, the button, the color, this and that. So it's mostly about, okay. And besides design, of course, when you're working on very interactive or very complex content, especially like learning content, or like large websites, they would be like, oh, this button is not working, this I could not get to the page that you were talking about. There is, I often get it that I definitely end up having typos in my material. So, things like that. So a lot of the stuff is visual or related to copy. A lot of the feedback is, but unfortunately, and I'm going to go back here, unfortunately, still the large number of teams that we speak with, they still share all that, ask their reviewers to share feedback on a spreadsheet or on email. And when they do that, that feedback tends to be very generic, because they can't, like, let's say they are on the 30th slide and they have no idea where, they took a note, they knew that there was something wrong, but they didn't take a note of it. So how do you really make sure that you get all the relevant feedback? You really need to set them up for success again. And that's where, you need to give them ways to share contextual feedback, that when they're reviewing the content, they should be able to really, now at least there's technology around there for it. And of course the board is, gives you that, really when they're viewing the content, they should be able to share a comment. And because most of it is really related to copy, some text, some design related elements, it'll become so much easier for them to also share feedback on that content, rather than giving you a very generic, vague feedback, which you don't know how to find. All right. Before we move to then organizing feedback, anything that you have, any questions around, getting reviewers, set up, and also on your review cycles? All right. So you do end up getting a lot of reviews, and I have seen it firsthand from in a lot of projects. There are content pieces where I've seen thousands of reviews come in. How do you make sure that, and you cannot address everything, definitely, uh, uh, you cannot address everything, so you need to set priorities. uh, and I think that is very important. That is, those priorities have to be tied to your goals. In the end, it's important to, again, and I think again, Chinmay, this ties to this whole, your question as well. How do you really move forward when reviewers and stakeholders do not agree? Look at your priorities, look at your goals. Does it comply to the larger goal? Because of course there cannot be agreement on everything, but if everybody is aligned to the same goal, is able to prioritize based on those goals, then it will be a better alignment. You would get to a better alignment. So again, you want to set those priorities right. First of all, you need to understand what those priorities are based on. And then once you have all that feedback coming in, you need to be able to organize it as well. Like, you want to be able to see, okay, you know what, this is what I'm going to address first, or not me, but the entire team. This is what we are going to address first. This is going to be high priority. This is going to be addressed in the alpha phase. Maybe it's not something that we need to worry about right now. So organizing feedback really helps your team to make sure that, not everything that has come in needs to be answered and questioned. I mean, I often get overwhelmed if I get too much feedback and I just do not know what to do with it, right? So how do you start seeing things? You need to start putting them in buckets. So for example, in zipBoard, we have a Kanban board. So you can really start putting them in buckets and say, team, let's look at this first. We will fix these in this phase, and then we'll move to the next phase, and so on. So putting that feedback in perspective will also help you move through your revision cycles faster too.
So one of the things.
So again, this is Beth telling about how they organize feedback and what do they do when they get all that feedback. Mine, the first view that you're seeing is, in fact, is a Kanban view, which is something that I prefer because it's more visual. But then there are teams who use a spreadsheet kind of view as well, because again, if you do have thousands of feedback coming in, you want to make sure that you can segregate through it. You should be able to search through it. You can maybe even download into a CSV and so on. So let's hear Beth.
So one of the things that that we do, I mentioned about the PM setting up the phases and so forth in zipBoard, is now we're actually starting to to use the product to review the module and bring up issues for the developer. And so this is what the task list looks like within the, within zipBoard. And it's easy for us to be able to, look at the issues and look at their priorities, look at the status. So QA, for example, when the developer believes it's fixed, they'll put it in the resolve fixed. And then when QA has tested, we'll say it's QA verified, or we reopen, or whatever the outcome is for that particular task.
So if you notice here again, the whole point is to have a workflow in place, right? Like they have a very clear workflow as to, okay, when a task comes in, they go through that task list. When a feedback comes in, they go through that feedback list, they decide which one needs to be fixed, and they move it to their internal team's workflow. And that's why you see all these, it gets converted into a task. And once that does get converted into tasks, they still try to prioritize it, like which is critical, what is, low priority, which is high priority. And when a developer fixes it, or a designer fixes it, or whoever is supposed to fix it, it goes through a phase of verification from QA, and then, finally closing the task. So having a clear, having a clear setup like that, workflow for your tasks and for your review cycle would help you again close tasks faster, would also help the entire team again be on the same page. Another thing that is very important for a good review process is to enable communication. Let's say your reviewer has shared some feedback. You have more questions around it. Imagine having this webinar. In fact, I do feel like the chat is not enough of a medium to have a conversation, but at least, not having feedback and not having a way to reconnect and talk more, or, ask more questions on the context that is being talked about, again becomes, then sets people up for, okay, what makes people lazy, first of all, right? Like, okay, I'm going to ask them together. Maybe we'll get on a Zoom call together and address these 30 feedback that came in. And it just takes away the purpose of having an asynchronous way of reviewing, and also giving, your stakeholders also a chance to review it at the time when they want to do it, right? And also losing the context overall. So again, it goes back to the whole way of doing it in Snagit, and then getting on a Skype call, and then, doing it, right? But here, what, at least with zipBoard, you can do is you can actually reply to a comment, and you can really have a conversation flowing with the stakeholders, with your internal team as well. So if there is something else, maybe they want to share another file, can you use this image, please? So you can have all of that context. But besides that, we also capture some of the things like, the environment details, because a lot of times, at least when things are very technical, they may not work in one particular environment, and you want to make sure that, and it may work on my machine, it may not work on somebody else's machine, and so on. So you want to make sure that you have all that information as well. So some of the information we capture ourselves to enable that communication for the developers, for the content team, to have a clear visibility of what is going on, where is it going on, and how can we fix it, right? And this is all important to again foster that communication between that stakeholder who's very busy, who's not really part of your team on an ongoing basis. So you're really having a communication with them. And of course, besides this, I'm not saying zipBoard is the only tool of communication. We've seen typically people or teams set up like a Slack channel for each content that they're producing, or like a Microsoft Teams channel for, and also setting up the same project, let's say in a Rike or Jira, so that you still have communication going on at a larger level. You can set up your user stories. You can have a more project management approach for your entire content production process, but for the review process, you bring it in zipBoard. And the both of them can also talk to each other. So we take we take all this feedback and we can connect it to your Jira instance, to your Slack, and everything. Deborah, yes, if people who are tagged in the comment will get notified again, and you can also tag them as well using @. So you can really mention them if you feel like they should also be part of the discussion. You can add them as watchers as well, which is a field that you can add, so that if you know that they are part of this comment, that they should be taking a look at it every time somebody updates it as well. All right, so once let's move on to thinking about what are the other elements of setting up the QA, internal QA, because I think what ends up happening is, of course, your reviewers will give you all the subject matter expert, the subject matter knowledge, but there are, given that we are dealing with so many technological things, there will be things that you need to think about beyond the knowledge as well. Right. So there are these are the main elements that we've able to identify that you can really divide your content review and QA process into. Largely, there's a huge, copy related review, right? There's language, grammar, tone, incorrect information, missing information, or some errors. There can be design related elements like, the branding, whether there's alignment with the branding or not. Are there some missing elements? There's no call to action, there's no button, incomplete flow, a form doesn't complete, and so on, right? So those are the design related elements, and they can be technical. If you're building a web page, there's SEO to think about, compatibility with where you're publishing, if it's an LMS or an e-learning content, or does it work in the LMS or not? Your devices, which all devices you'll be building it for, does it work for those devices? If you care about accessibility, which is a large requirement these days as well, then you have to also test for accessibility, making sure that it's 508 compliance or 502. Oh, okay. And then localization, if you are building in different languages, text tends to overflow, does not fit properly, so you have to test for those things as well. Any other compliance related testing that you need to do. So that all falls into a technical category. And then functional, which is again a big part of testing. Does it flow? Does it have all the information? Does it really meet the goals? Is it aligned to the audience? Are we speaking in the right tone? If you're building content for students, are we able to keep them motivated? Are there any other errors? So I think largely you can divide your content review and QA process in those elements, and making sure that you're testing internally. This I feel is the largely work that the production team needs to do, and having a QA person who's responsible for this really helps to make sure that all of these elements are checked. So how do they do that? Like, they really need to set up their test cases. Yes, Lloyd, we will have the access to the PPT. Sorry about that. So how do we set up the test cases? We need to make sure that all of these scenarios, that elements that we talked about, having test cases in place. For example, you've built a scenario that you want a person to sign up a form. Once they sign up, they need to do this. Then that email needs to go to a list. All that is a scenario that you need to build as a test case. Having those test cases early on again helps to make sure that you are going to test these scenarios when we have actually built, when you've actually built this completely. Right, so build those test cases, build checklists. And again, some of these things are going to be elements that are going to help you over and over and over again, like in every content that you build. So if you have a good structure for test cases, if you have your checklist ready for grammar, for language, for every purpose, you have a checklist ready, then you sort of keep on adding to it for every content. You can customize it for every content, but at least you have your basic structure ready. And then, set up your environment. If you need to test for multiple devices, maybe you need to test on, you can set up something like browser stack or, the device information tools. So you don't really have to have every device possible in-house, but at least think about all your environment setup. Where are you going to publish? how are you going to test that, and when are you going to test that as well? And of course, like I mentioned, the tools, because again, if you are doing your if you have your user stories in Jira, if you are tracking your feedback in zipBoard, if you are going to use browser stack for your testing, so having all that in place is really helpful to know, okay, you know what, these are the tools that we are going to acquire, these are the tools these people need to use. So set your team up for that as well. Once you do have and this again, this is like a very generic QA process that I've laid out, but it's really for, again, for the internal QA team to figure out that, okay, you know what, I need to set up a basic unit test for almost every functionality that we are building. Then once we've tested that, we need to also maybe test for UI, the copy, the accessibility, localization, whatever other requirements are for this project. As you keep testing those, what is going to be your bug reporting structure? How are you going to report those issues? How are you going to send them to the content team who's going to fix them? And then how do you really track them back? Like who's going to, like Beth talked about earlier, once the developer fixes it, how do you see what is fixed, what is not fixed? And all that needs to be set up as well. So once we have set this up completely, I think the next step is to measure and iterate. It's very important. Like anything else, it cannot be a linear process. You need to make sure that whatever you're doing is well measured. Is you iterate on it and then improve it based on that. So your process. Oops, so somehow this image is not showing, but this is really an image from, let me see if I can fetch it from somewhere, or I can show it in zipBoard itself. But this really image was talking about how we are able to give you a quick report to see where your issues are coming from. So, really give you a way to measure your process, right? If you're not measuring your process, you may not be able to really see what uh, you may not be able to make improvements on it, right? So, and no process is set in stone. So that's really important to know. So I don't know if I can share. I'll share this with you guys later, but you can really, you can really see reports as to where the issues are coming from, who is it reported to, and so on. So it helps you understand, okay, these are the things that you need to work on. And then again, once you've set up that process, work with your stakeholders, review those reports and check with your stakeholders that this is how we need to improve our process. Look at what worked, look at what did not work, and then in the end, iterate and improve. Like that's really important. You need to make sure that you are you're looking at how your performance was, how well your team did, what are the things, what are the bottlenecks, where were you setting up wrong deadlines, maybe setting up wrong expectations. So measure all of it so that you can go back and improve that process. And that's it, and that's a wrap. And I see that, oops, I see that there are, yes, we will record, we will share the recording and the PPT with everyone. Is there any other questions? Deborah, I will definitely share a video, instruction video for your clients. In fact, if anybody wants specific feedback or specifically, a quick walkthrough of zipBoard and how it can fit into your review, please feel free to ping me, or you can in fact set up a time with me on my calendar. I've shared that here. We will be sharing this deck and the recording for later on. And yeah, that's about it. Was that helpful? Is there anything that you guys have as a takeaway? All right. That's it then. Thank you so much, guys. I'm really grateful. We're really looking forward to this webinar series. We hope to have more guests as well in the future who will be talking about, who will talk about their processes. So if there is anything specific that you guys would love to have us discuss on the webinar series, please do reach out to us. We would love to hear from you and get feedback as well. Thank you so much.